Hi everyone, good morning. This is Lisa from Dog Days Training for Life, and welcome to the third in our series of live chats on dogs and training. So today's topic is going to be on using management in training. And when I was getting ready yesterday to post this on Facebook, I was thinking to myself, I better come up with a really catchy, kind of sexy title, because my thought was, and when most people saw the title, they'd go, "Ooh, oh, so boring and dull." But I'm hoping after you've heard this chat that you'll realize how incredibly valuable management is in both training and just in sharing your lives together in general. How it really speeds up the training and just makes everything go so much more smoothly. And I'm going to show you a new way of thinking about management that hopefully is going to help you make really great management choices and show you how to be creative in finding management options based on your lifestyle and your home environment and just the actual issue that you're dealing with. So I should say, if you're joining me live now, welcome. That's so awesome. You're welcome to drop a comment in the chat box. Just a reminder, you guys are probably all more savvy about this stuff than I am, but I'm the only one that's visible. So if you have any questions, you're not going to come up on screen, but I would love to have comments or just to say hi, where you're from. And for those of you catching this on replay, thanks so much for joining. I appreciate that. It's awesome. So on task. Talking about management, before we actually get into the nitty-gritty, I think it would be helpful to just make sure everybody's on the same page about what it is. Probably most of you, when you think about management, you think about a dog crate. That's a pretty common management tool that's used widely for both puppies and for dogs for lots of different issues. And so when we think about a crate, you probably think, well, that's, controlling the dog, it's containing the dog, it's stopping it from being able to do things and get into trouble. But what I want to try to show you is to get you thinking about it in a slightly different way. I tend not to think about management as controlling the dog, but rather in manipulating or controlling the environment or the dog's access to the environment. So let's take a common, easy example just to try and show a little bit more about that to make it clearer. So if we brought a new puppy home, I can't imagine not using some type of management, because that would be a bit of a gong show. And a standard piece of equipment for most puppies would either be a crate or an X-Pen. And so we would use those tools to our advantage, because one of the biggest concerns when we bring a new puppy home is its safety, because they love to put everything in their mouth. So just letting them roam about freely in the house before they're a little bit more mature and have some skills would be a very dangerous thing to be doing. So using a crate or an X-Pen would be invaluable in keeping our puppy safe, because when we weren't able to supervise it or we weren't actively training appropriate behaviors, then we can know that they're safely tucked in that crate or that X-Pen, and that's managing the environment for us. It's creating an environment that is safe for them. So that would be the first choice for a lot of people. But there are other options that we could do too. Management doesn't just involve tools. Management is also about things that we do. So another option for a puppy to keep them safe would be making the choice of puppy-proofing the area that they're going to be in. So we would put away all the chemicals and cleaners, anything that they might try to get into or eat that would be dangerous for them. We would put away all the electrical cords. Maybe we'd get the kids' safety plugs so that they couldn't stick their nose or paw into the electrical outlet. So we'd still be accomplishing the same thing. We would be making the environment safe by managing it, but the way that we're doing it is different. So that's the really cool thing about management. It's not always just about using tools, but it's also about things that you're doing. So that gives us a lot more flexibility. And for some people, based on the environment that they're living in, sometimes some tools or options just aren't available for them because, for people that have those lovely, big, open concept homes, you can't, be using baby gates to cordon things off. Maybe your dog's not ready to use the crate yet because you haven't conditioned them to accept it as a safe, fun, or comfortable place to be. There may be some reason why an X-Pen isn't practical for you in your environment. So having other options available and being able to put on your thinking cap and be a little bit creative so you can think of other ways to manage your dog and manage the environment can be really, really helpful. Now, if we were thinking about, say, house training for a puppy, well, I'll use a puppy for one more time and then we'll move on to other examples. But for house training, it's not so much a matter of making the environment safe, but now it's about the options and choices that the puppies have. So if they have too much freedom, then it's pretty easy for them to be able to go in behind the couch or outside of the room down the hallway, potentially to go to the bathroom. And so giving them too much freedom is a problem because there's too many options available. So that's the other reason why management is so fantastic. Not only does it potentially keep your dog safe, but it's also limiting the number of options that they have available so that when you're trying to train a behavior, there's not all these other things happening that are kind of vying for space in your puppy's mind or building up into their repertoire. So the way I like to think about it is good habits are just as easy, or I guess I should say it the other way around. Bad habits are just as easy to build as good habits. So when you're clever about using management to manipulate or control the dog's environment, you can be in charge. You can be in control of choosing what behavior or behaviors it is that you like and only really making it possible for the dog to do those. So this speeds up the training because you're not going back and forth trying to, help the puppy develop these particular habits or work exclusively on a certain behavior to make it really strong because they've got all these other options too. And that can be confusing to the student when they're like, well, what is it? This is just as easy for me to do as that one. I don't understand which one I should be picking. And that can create some frustration for the dog or puppy. And it definitely can create frustration for us because how does it feel chasing around after the puppy, cleaning up messes when you could make your life so much easier and your puppy's life so much easier by using some management so that when you're not able to supervise your puppy and you're not actively teaching them the behavior that you want, that you can just tuck them away nice and comfortably and safely so that you know that when you're not watching them, they're not busy building bad habits or behaviors that you would prefer that they not do. So there's two very common typical examples of why we would want to use management, that not using it can create all kinds of problems. Now, another reason why we would, when we would want to use management is, let's say you didn't use management originally, and now your dog is doing something that you don't like. So it's not like we're starting from scratch and we're building from the base up. Now your dog's already doing a behavior and you don't really like it. Or maybe you're bringing a dog into your home that already has some habits and behaviors, and you want to teach the ones that suit you and your lifestyle a little bit better. So in that case, really it comes back down to what do you want the dog to do and building that behavior up. And if you watch the last live chat number 2 from the 17th, we did go into more detail about that. So I'm not going to do that here. But my point is that even when you're trying to change behaviors, it's still really about you picking a behavior that you would rather them do and then managing the environment so that it's really easy for them to do that one. And it's going to remove all those other options out of the way. And the reason why we want to do that is, the more they practice those other options, the more entrenched they're going to become. The more likely the dog's going to continue doing them because the habit's getting stronger and stronger. And the downside of that is the longer that they're able to do that, probably the more time it's going to take you to be able to teach them the alternate behavior and them being able to adopt that as something that they're going to want to do moving forward. So when we're using management, we're still going to be having a plan of needing to teach them what we do want them to do. Management isn't just going to fix the problem. Management doesn't happen in place of training. You still need to train and teach the dog what you do want them to do. But the cool thing about management is that whether you have that plan in place and you're getting ready, or you are now starting to teach the new behavior, or whether for some reason you can't start, you don't know what to do, even if you put management into place in the meantime, even if you are not ready to start training the new behavior, the cool thing about the management is that it's helping prevent unwanted behaviors from developing, and it's also helping remove the chance, the option of the dog to be continuing to do these habits that you're not liking. So I guess an easier way to put that would be that by using management, you are controlling what behavior is getting reinforced. Now, if you've ever listened to me talk before or have hung around me for any length of time, you're going to know that it's all about reinforcement. That's what drives behavior. That's what motivates the dog. I mean, there is other stuff, but we don't go down that pathway. We want to focus on motivating our dog to get stuff that they want, that they do things again or will be more likely to do them again in the future because they know there's a great payout. There's a good outcome for them. So when you are removing other options out of the dog's repertoire or daily life so that all that reinforcement and attention is put on the behaviors that you do like, wow, that is so incredibly powerful. So that's another reason why it's really, really valuable to implement management, no matter what stage of your life that you are in together. So one thing that I should say too about management is we talked about how it doesn't replace training. The other thing is, in many cases, management will just be short-term. And once we've got that behavior that we like trained, and we've trained it, we've talked before about, you start very, very easiest example, classroom environment, somewhere in your home, no distractions, no real life going on. And then you gradually build it up, small step by small step, till your training level is basically what real life feels like to your dog. Then you've got a usable behavior. And then at that point, you can remove the management. You may need to be a little bit careful about it. You're going to take it away gently. You may need to do some supervision, and you may need to assist your dog to remind them what those good choices and behaviors that you've been working on are. But the goal is that that management's going to be removed out of your dog's life, because now you've got a usable behavior that works really great and it's an option that you love. So in other cases, depending on the situation, depending on the dog and the behavior, short-term management might not be enough. Sometimes we will choose long-term management. And there's a few different examples. Some are, pretty ubiquitous, like a fence in your yard. Even though you may have developed some great behaviors, you've got an awesome recall, you can get your dog's attention no matter what's going on. They love to stay close, or, sort of stick around to keep an eye on you because, you've got such a great relationship and you've had so many fun things you've done together that they'd be like, why would they ever leave? But the reality of it is that, having that security of that fence in your yard so that you don't have to be 100% in supervising mode with your dog just to make sure that they're safe, that's a management option or tool that, a lot of us are happy to have and to continue using, even though we might not necessarily always need it. It's nice to have. Another management tool that we often continue using would be a leash, that even though we might have some really great skills of our dog learning how to be able to stay at our side, we have a rocking recall so they'll come back anytime that we need. We can tell them to stop and wait for us. We can ask them to check in, or that's something that they do automatically. So you think they'd be pretty reliable and it's safer for them to be off leash. In certain circumstances, like walking into new areas or going into areas maybe where there's, children or safety issues. Personally, I wouldn't risk it. I don't have to be proving to myself or anybody else that, wow, my dog's so well behaved, or I'm such a great trainer that, I'm going to potentially put my dog at risk and have them off leash in certain situations just to prove that they can be off leash. I'm going to use a leash or a long line because my dog's life is more important to me than proving my prowess as a trainer or, bolstering my ego. Now, there's other times where you may decide that you need to use long-term management. One would be with garbage cans. So you can train your dog to stay out of the garbage using positive methods. I know a lot of people use other styles of methods, and typically they are not actually effective, or if they do work, usually it's at some other price, which again, we just don't kind of waste our time doing that stuff. So you can positively train it, and you can, if you spend the time and you do it properly, you can make them reliable so they just don't go in the garbage. But, I think, hey, what the heck? Would I actually think that it's even fair to leave an open garbage can that's got remnants of food and other, tempting things in it, leave that out and in the open when I'm sharing my life with an opportunistic scavenger? No. I'd probably get either, a secure garbage can, and that, what that means for some dogs, and that may not exist, or just put the garbage away, that it's somewhere else where the dog cannot gain access. There you go. Problem solved. Easy peasy. I'm happy to continue using management for the dog's life, because to me, it just makes more sense. I personally, I'd rather just be spending my time training other behaviors where long-term management isn't something that I'm interested in having to do. Now, one other thing for long-term management is if you have a dog that, and we're going to get into reactivity in a minute, but if you have a dog that's reactive, that they, let's say, for example, they don't like people coming into the house and their reaction is pretty extreme, that, it's not just a matter that they get overexcited or that they maybe are a bit noisy, but they actually act out on that. They they're not trying to avoid and leave the area, but things can happen where people are in danger. There's some risk. Depending on the degree, often, and I do this a lot, this is part of the business that, I help people quite a bit with. But there are some situations where we realize the extent of the dog's discomfort and the degree of the behavior that they exhibit in that situation doesn't warrant the risk. So in that case, those dogs have lifelong management in place. If we know people are going to come into the home, the dogs are safely tucked. I know of one example, through training, it wasn't a client of mine, but a friend of mine, the dog actually had to be locked in the room so that no one could accidentally gain access, like physically bolted and locked. The dog outside of those times when people were in the house had, wonderful life, lots of stuff going on. It was great. It led a fulfilled life, but to have people in the home was just not an option for that dog. So management really was the only thing that they could do unless they were considering rehoming. And for them, they did want to do that for that dog. So in general, most of the things that we're going to be using management for, again, is just short term to really make your training go much smoother and make it go much faster and be less frustrating. And so that's the thing that we're going to focus on today. And so I'm going to give you, pardon me, a couple of examples just to kind of walk you through it. Now, the really cool thing about using management is whether you're starting from scratch and building a new behavior up, or whether your dog has picked up some habits along the way that you're not really liking, and now you're wanting to change those and again, build a different behavior. Either way, you're often, not always, but often going to be using management in the same way. The only difference would be that if your dog already has a behavior now that's working out nicely for them, then you may need to do a little bit more training and using management for a little longer before they're kind of ready to go, and that you can pull the management out. But often the tool that you use or what you do for management will be the same, whether you're starting from scratch or you're rebuilding. Now, one example would be the counter surfing. So if your dog, whether you're trying to prevent it or let's maybe say now they're already doing it, they're an accomplished counter surfer, that any chance they get, if they're in that area and you're not keeping them busy or they're a little bit bored, that's kind of their go-to behaviors. Get those paws up and start nosing around on the counter. So if we were going to use tools, some obvious examples would be, the crate, the X-Pan, using X-Pan where you stretch it out and it can become a boundary rather than a container, using a baby gate so that you basically deny access. The dog can't get into that environment so that they can practice that behavior and do more of it. Those are pretty straightforward. But for some of us, maybe your dog, again, is not comfortable with the crate yet. You need to spend some time building up that comfort level. Maybe an X-Pan's not an option. Or the other reason you may not use a management tool is you might be one of those fortunate, lovely, lucky people that has a big, open concept plan. Great for living, so not great for working with dogs, because how do you manage them when it's just one big open area? So that's definitely a time where you have to be thinking, okay, let's put on this management thinking cap. How do I get around this? Because I can't use a tool to make it happen. So in that case, you need to make a choice. What can you do to the environment to make it so that the dog won't get reinforced for counter surfing? So you're going to have the lickety-split cleanest countertops in town if you're going to use that as your management tool. You want to make those countertops absolutely uninviting. So you can't leave the loaf of bread out. You can't leave the buttered knife in the sink or laying around. There can't be a dollop of mayonnaise or some breadcrumbs. All of that stuff needs to be gone. You have to be very mindful that your counters must be clear of any food items or things that are going to entice the dog to want to jump up and investigate. Now, in addition to food, the other thing is sometimes just items are up there, like our keys or remote control, things that have our scent. That's inviting because the dog can smell that from the ground. So that's going to encourage them to jump up too. So even non-food items, you should think about how are they being stored up there. If the countertops are wide enough, either push all that stuff out of the way back so that they can't reach it, or ideally don't be putting stuff in there or up on the counter so that, again, it might entice your dog up. That's not as powerful a management choice as just keeping them out of the area altogether. But, if that's your only option, you can make it work. But it does require a little more work from you, that you need to be consistent and thoughtful about what you're doing so that your dog has zero chance to get reinforced. Because honestly, one of the best ways to keep driving behavior forward, and here's my techie nerd trainer side coming out, is what we call intermittent reinforcement, where maybe your dog, 9 times out of 10, you're really good about keeping your counter clean. And so they go up and they're like, nothing, over and over again. And then just that one time, you leave the butter knife out. And they're like, score! So guess what? That's like playing the slot machines, right? We will keep, I guess now it's pushing a button, but, pulling that arm, even though we know we're not going to win every time and maybe we're never going to win, but there's just living in the hope that that's going to happen again. Well, that's kind of what letting them do a behavior that you're trying to remove from the repertoire, letting that happen intermittently. Sometimes that's even stronger than them getting reinforced continually for it. So the same thing would apply if your dog's jumping on people. Let's say while they were outside on leash. So, there's a couple of management options there. You could have them on leash, of course, or on a long line. And when you see a person coming, you're going to physically be able to control access so they can't get over to the people, unless you're in training mode or you have some way to supervise them. Maybe you're holding their harness. That's not training, but at least it's preventing the behavior. So that's potentially an option. Or maybe, you're dropping treats on the ground so their attention's down rather than up. I actually teach a greeting behavior using targeting, which is incredibly powerful, but that's a whole other story. So anyway, sorry, got a little off topic. So, you can use management tools. Another option is if you have a really reliable recall, when you see people, you could call your dog back to you. But, you really have to believe and be confident that the training that you've put in is solid enough. You've trained the recall around people that you can rely on your dog to do it. You don't want to be leaving that to chance. And so that's why if your dog is still in jumping up mode, then using a long line or a leash, using a management tool really is the best option. Because again, if you're careful, and most of the time they don't get a chance to jump, but that 1 in 10 times they're going over and getting to jump up, you know what? Intermittent reinforcement, that has been really incredibly powerful and putting a lot of money in that jumping up bank account, even though, all week you've been working so hard. I've talked about the teeter-totter, that, you're really doing your best to keep the jumping value down and start building the 4 on the floor behavior. But all it takes, is one time of them jumping up, and whoop, boy, that has been probably lots of practice sessions that have just been completely undermined. So using management to be very mindful about controlling their ability to do the other behavior. Again, I can't emphasize that enough. Now I'm going to talk about one more thing regarding management. And we talked earlier a little bit about it, and that's dogs that are reactive. When a dog is reactive, and we could use 2 examples, being reactive when you're out on leash to other dogs, to people, there's tons of things they could be reactive to. or say reactive to the doorbell. We still have a training plan. We want to build up another behavior, like let's say for doorbell reactivity. Our goal, perhaps, your goal for the behavior you want, it's a personal thing. There's no one answer. I love to train dogs to go to their mat, and eventually the doorbell becomes the cue for that. So I don't even have to do anything. It becomes completely hands off. I don't have to tell them to go to bed. The doorbell is the cue to go to their mat. Maybe you don't want to do that way. Maybe you just want the dog to come back to you and stay with you. Lots of different options. But in the meantime, while you're training that, we've got a whole other part. Not only are we trying to remove the behavior that you don't like, maybe, charging the door and barking and doing all this stuff. So that part of it is similar. The process would be the same, but there's this extra component of the emotion, that the dog has an emotional response to the doorbell or to the sight of a dog in the distance. And we need to address that too. Without addressing the emotion, and that has to be done first, we are going to have very, very limited success in being able to train an alternative behavior. And the other reason that's so important for a dog's well-being, of why we want to use management for reactivity, is to take stress out of their daily lives. If you think maybe you don't have a super busy household where people are coming by constantly ringing your doorbell, but even once a day, it takes 36 hours to 72 hours for cortisol and adrenaline to go back to normal levels. So even once a day, if someone's coming to the door and your dog's having a blow up over that, that's still, creating this rush of hormones, and it's going to take them a while to get back down. So that's why when we're working on reactivity, it's absolutely vital for us to use management so that we can not only train better behavior, but also help our dogs by taking out that arousal or fear or conflict out of their daily life. Now, when we talk about using management for reactivity, we may have to use a different level of management, especially in the beginning. For example, for some of my reactive dogs, when it's pretty severe, like you can see, they really don't want to go out. They're really worried, and they may be starting to have kind of general anxiety just because, again, this is happening on a daily basis, and they're always in some state of arousal or stress. And so to start with, I'll often say, for those particular dogs, we are just going to put them on a holiday. We're going to take walking out of their scenario, their life, completely for maybe 10 days or 2 weeks. Now, I know some of you may be going, oh my gosh, that's impossible. That you can't do that. But, for those dogs, our goal is their emotional well-being and their sense of safety and security. So, we find other ways to exercise them and give them fresh air. Hopefully, in those cases, the parents will have a backyard, or there's always other options. Sometimes that degree of management isn't required. Maybe all we need to do is pick where we take our dogs. So if it's dog reactivity that we're helping our guy with, then we go places where there aren't going to be dogs. We go other places. Or we pick times of day when it's very unlikely that there's going to be other dogs out and about. That's why so many people with reactive dogs, I know you know what I'm talking about, that you're up at the crack of dawn out walking or hiking, literally almost in the dark, because you're just trying to take out the chance of running into any other dogs, take that out of the picture. And, my hat is off to you, your level of commitment, that you're, adjusting your lifestyle and using that management to help your dog. That's fantastic. But hopefully we can, at some point, use management in combination with a positive training plan so that we can help our dogs be able to cope with those things and live a slightly more normal lifestyle. Not only helpful for our dogs, but it's certainly nice for us too. So let me just make sure that I haven't forgotten anything. I think that covers just about everything. I know we didn't go into a lot of detail. Like we could talk about, I had a list here about talking about using management when you're introducing a new animal, whether that be a cat or another dog, about stealing food off the coffee table, about pulling on leash. I mean, it's just, the list is endless. Anything your dog does, anything you want to teach your dog as far as skill or behavior, it's going to go better if you use management in it, in the training plan or in the way that they're living their life. And then once that's in place, again, you have to be mindful of how you take off the management. Even when that new skill is in place and super solid, you're still going to have to be there when you're reintroducing those options. I mean, a perfect example would be for a puppy that we've put the $500 Italian leather shoes away because we don't want that to be a chewing option. And we've been building up a great habit for our puppies where the only thing they've had access to are sanctioned chew toys. Now we're ready to reintroduce some of these things. Well, we're not going to simply put those back out there and go, okay, good, job's done, we're ready to go. We have to be there to supervise. Once we start removing the management, that's sort of not an all or nothing thing. We do it carefully. We're there to help supervise so that we can redirect and remind our dog, help them find that place back to that behavior that we've been building up and reinforcing. So there's still some care needed when we take it away, but the value again lies in that it allows you to train so much more effectively that I can't imagine not using it, because it just makes things so much harder for everybody. I hope that helped, gave you some insight. On my group, I've been regularly posting little challenges saying, hey, is your dog counter surfing? Hey, is your dog reactive? Let's talk about some management ideas, how could we do that? So if you have any questions about what type of management or how to implement it for a particular issue that you're working on, whether that's a behavioral issue or it's just a regular training, a skill issue, you're welcome to leave it in the comments below, or you can come on over to our group to join in the conversation and get some answers. We've got some great people in there that are great for stepping up and giving a hand from their experience. And of course, I'm always there too. I love answering questions. So that's another option for you to get a hand. But hopefully this gave you some ideas to think about and helped you look at it in a way that you're not going to want to train without using it anymore. So thanks again for stopping by, and have a great day with your dog. Take care. Bye-bye.